I see you got my letters. Finally. What are you gonna do, Al?
I don't know.
We're back to that. Are we back there? What about the past couple of days? They happened, you know?
I know that they happened and they were wonderful, but they were also very irresponsible.
And your word is shot to hell now, don't you think?
I don't know. I'll find out when I talk to him.
This is not about keeping your promise, and it's not about following your heart. It's about security.
What is that supposed to mean?
Money!
What are you talking?
He's got a lot of money!
Now I hate you, you
Well, I
slow
hate
bastard.
you. If you leave here, I hate you.
What
I hate you
have
if
you
you
been
leave
paying
here.
attention to anything that's been happening?
I guess not. I think I must have misread all of those signals.
I guess you did.
You're bored! You're bored and you know it. You wouldn't be here if there wasn't something missing. Would you just stay with me?
Stay with you? What for? Look at us. We're already fighting.
Well, that's what we do. We fight. I'm not afraid to hurt your feelings.
So what?
So it's not going to be easy. It's going to be really hard. And we're going to have to work at this every day, but I want to do that because I want you. I want all of you forever. You and me, every day. Will you do something for me? Please? You just picture your life for me? 30 years from now, 40 years from now? What's it look like? If it's with that guy, go. Go! I lost you once. I think I could do it again. If I thought it's what you really wanted. But don't you take the easy way out.
What easy way? There is no easy way. No matter what I do, somebody gets hurt.
Would you stop thinking about what everyone wants? Stop thinking about what I want, what he wants, what your parents want. What do you want? What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want? What do you want?
I have to go.
Today we're talking about the fight. Can anyone represent with the fight? Many times we're so afraid of who we are and how we're going to interact with our spouse that we don't discover how to win together. That's what the fight is all about. We get in this place where we're afraid of who we are, what we're about, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, that we don't even know how to interact with the very one that we're married to or the one that we're living with and trying to make things work. We don't know what to do because we're in this place of insecurity. And so today we want to talk about what is the fight and where the fight and how the fight and can you fight fair and does it work and does it get us anywhere? But rather than trying to have this Hollywood fairy tale relationship, what does it look like to have a real relationship? What does it look like to have something real that actually works? That's what I'm excited about today. How do we embrace our personalities? How do we embrace who we are, find out who we are, and work from that spot? How do we figure out how to win together? You ever thought about that? How do we learn how to win together? This couple that I have up here with me today, I'm super excited about. Isaiah and Jenna Andrews. Don't give them a hand clap yet, though, because I love them so much. This couple has come alongside Jamie and I from the very beginning, years and years and years ago, come alongside of us and didn't just offer themselves, but their service and their energy to us as a couple and to where we were in ministry and just have been there along the whole way, really to see God glorified. And I love that about them is they want to see God exalted. And so they've been not just beside us in word, but beside us in deed. They serve as elders here at Lifeway Church, and Isaiah is also on staff as Next Step pastor and Dream Team director. They're a precious, precious couple that are going to give you so much today. I'm super excited about it. Thank you guys for who you are and all that you do, not just for Lifeway Church, but for Jamie and I as well. Ladies and gentlemen, now, Isaiah and Jenna Andrews. I just had to set it up. You guys ready today?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
How long have you been married?
6 years.
Good job. I'm glad you took that one. Usually you hand that one off
studied.
to the wife. When and where did you first meet, and what were your initial thoughts of each other?
Okay. Golly. So we met through mutual friends. I was living with a roommate in Spearfish. We came up here to Rapid City. We went to a club. We were hanging out, and she happened to be there, and that's how I met her. Dance on the dance floor.
Oh.
Yeah. No, it's not always.
Clubbing.
We were not Christians at the time. We were not Christians.
Yeah.
What were your first thoughts of each other?
I thought she was pretty. Like, it was.
She a good dancer?
I did most of the dancing, I guess.
Oh, gotcha.
It was more just like a physical attraction, and that's kind of where we started, in that physical, toxic place of, I only want you because I think that you're pretty, and then once it's over type of a deal.
So is that what the early years of the relationship look like? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah. So we were actually together for 6 years before we ever got married. We had 2 kids. And we were like the epitome of toxic. Like,
Wow.
just toxic. I had dad issues. My dad died when I was 16. He always had another girl on the side, and we put it together, and it was like just magic of what the devil did. And
Wow.
so, yeah, that's how it was for 6 years straight.
Wow. And so, not to say that I like it and think it's healthy, but the idea that you started off in lust is such an interesting idea of where we're going to end up today. But the start of it, like you said, was toxic and not pretty. And sometimes we don't know the difference from that, especially if we're not believers and we don't understand Scripture. Lust can feel so much like love. You know, that overwhelming attraction, or that those things just blowing up inside. We can think they're love, or we can think they're something healthy. But you guys started off in a place that you're not afraid to sit here today and say, that's toxic, and that was dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Not pretty. Hurting you guys and those around you, possibly.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was sad. Like, it was really sad to see where we were. I mean, we were only 19, too, when we met. We were both 19, so, I mean, we were immature, weren't following God, and just went after lust.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was talking about this maybe 3 weeks ago to some younger kids, and I was saying, like, I grew up with a single mother, and I only had my sister as a sibling, so I grew up with just 2 ladies in the house. And you would think that having that type of a upbringing or a background, it would have made me have more respect for women, but it was the opposite. Like,
Wow.
I literally only cared about my mom and my sister, and every other woman was just sexual desire to fulfill a fantasy and then be done with. And it was like,
Wow.
and it started really early. It started when I was in the 4th grade, and so I was chewing on this too this morning. I had multiple girlfriends from the 4th grade to a junior in high school, and I had a different girlfriend every year.
Wow.
And it was like just this game of, well, you're in season now, and then next season I don't want nothing to do with you. And that's the way that it happened. And even when we met, it was the same way. And I was like literally thinking about that. Like, how does someone who grows up with a single mom and a sister and has so much respect for them have no respect for women outside of that?
Wow.
So that's where our relationship started. And I was that same egotistical, prideful player, if you want to say. And then we had 2 kids.
Wow.
In the midst of that.
Yeah, it was really great. So we didn't plan the first kid. Like, we just accidentally got pregnant. Well, accidentally, but it wasn't planned. But, and then so we thought, like, oh, like, we are so great together. We should, like, plan another baby and throw another baby into this mess and see what happens. And it's like, we were so toxic, and then we decided to throw another child into it. And it is, like, I'm so happy that God's, like, redeemed them and, like, have changed us, because I couldn't imagine where our daughters would be if we were those same people, or who, like, our daughters would pursue if we wouldn't have changed.
Wow. It's interesting that both of you were operating out of a hurt. I think both of you had a void there and a hurt there. That's the results that you were getting, was out of that pain, just trying to fill that with something. And so marriage, what were the thoughts and feelings toward marriage? You guys are together, you got kids. Where's marriage in the picture? Anywhere?
For me, it was, because having a child outside of marriage, I didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't want to be a single mom. I didn't want to have to raise kids on my own. And so for me, marriage was what I wanted, but not necessarily with the man who Isaiah was at the time.
Wow. Yeah, and for me, marriage was not an option. And it wasn't necessarily just because of our toxic relationship or where we were as a couple, but it was the way in which I grew up. Like, my dad wasn't in the picture, though my mom was married. The men that were in my life, they weren't married, but they had kids, and so that was the norm. Like, you have kids, and with this woman, she might be some crazy woman, she might be the baby mama drama type deal, but that was just the norm for us. So I knew that I wanted kids just because I didn't have a dad, and I wanted to be in my kid's life. But at the same time, I didn't want to be married because it was never modeled for us. That's not something that we looked forward to or was excited about. So
Yeah.
for me, marriage was not an option.
And so, why did you ultimately decide to get married? How did that come about then?
Oh man, so that's a long story, and I'll try to condense it as best as I can. So we had two daughters at the time, and I was sitting at my computer. I was doing like accounting at that time online. I was sitting at my computer, and I just had this overwhelming dread of like, I don't like who I am, and how do I change this? And then I don't remember if I heard it or somebody said it to me, but it was, be careful because your daughters are going to pursue someone just like you. And I'm like, whoa. So I'm sitting there, and I have this dread, and I'm like, okay, I don't like who I am. I want to change. I don't know how to change. What do I do? And so then a light bulb popped in my head and was like, oh, become a Christian. Like, Christians got their lives together, and they're perfect, and you'll be a better person for it. So I literally hopped on Google, typed in how to become a Christian, and then the sinner's prayer popped up.
Wow.
I kid you not. And I'm sitting at my dining room table, and I read the sinner's prayer, and I'm like, cool, like nothing happened. And then I'm like, so what do you do next? And I'm like, all right, well, maybe I can join like a men's group. So I hop on online, Google men's Bible study groups, and the group that I found only met once a month on a Monday. And I'm like, oh, I just missed it. It's like, I can't do that. And then I just so happened to go to church that Sunday. And a family friend was there at the church. Nothing really magical happened during the sermon or anything like that, but I just felt like, oh, this is where I should be. And I got ready to walk out the door, and I asked the family friends that were there, do you think they'll baptize me? I'm like, absolutely. So I went, got baptized. The guy who baptized me was like, hey, we got this men's group. I'm like, yeah, I heard about it. It's once a month. He's like, you know what? But if you're committed, I'll invite you every week, because there's a single group or a smaller group that meets every week. So I was like, all right, I'll dive into that. So then I started going to that men's group, just sat there for 3 months, didn't say a word, started to learn how to be a man, how to be a husband, how to be a father. And then we went on a men's retreat, and it was the first time in my life, or our first time in our relationship, that after the men's retreat, I came home and I just said, I'm sorry for everything I put you through. Like, it was so crazy, like,
Wow.
for the first time, it like hit my heart. Like, I don't want to cry. For the first time, it hit my heart what I had put her through, but the shame and the fear that my daughters were going to look for a guy like me. And so I repented. Like, I didn't know what else to do, so I came home. I got on my knees, and I just said, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry that I put you through hell. I'm sorry that I didn't treat you the way that you deserve. I'm sorry that I never saw what you told me and all that stuff. And I'm sorry that I was in and out of the relationship, and I'm sorry that I've done this to you. And it was the first time ever that it finally like hit my heart, like, Isaiah, this isn't okay. And so yeah.
Were you wondering where your boyfriend went?
Well, first I want to say, like, what he said was true. And how he went to church is not how I went to church. He went to church, and I was like, nope, I'm mad at God. I don't like God. He took my dad because I didn't know scripture. You know, I didn't know, like, God doesn't take your people. Like, that's what the devil does. The devil comes to do that. So I blame God because he was the easiest to blame. And so he was going to church, you know, a few weeks. And I'm like, whatever, I'm not joining this. And then I just had this thought, like, oh no, he's going to go to church and find some Christian woman and leave me with these kids? I am going to go to church, and I'm going to keep an eye on him. Make sure he's not trying to pick up some Christian woman who has her life together and leave me with these kids. And so I only ended up at church to babysit my boyfriend. So it's amazing how God will use you to get you to church. But yes, when he came home, I was shocked. I was surprised, but I didn't believe it. Like, it was really hard for me because at this point it had been 5 years of hell.
Wow.
And so I didn't believe it. And yeah.
What started to change that actually got you guys to a wedding day? Like, what were some of the things that started happening, or are there things that allowed you to start believing it?
I think his actions after doing it for so long were helping. And then when we had met with you and Jamie, I mean, you guys have been with us basically from day one, from this Christian walk, it was just like, we're playing house. Like, that's not okay. And so for me, like, I wanted to be married. And I think finally he actually wanted to be married. And so we walked through that with you guys.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think for me, we had done things wrong for so long that I finally wanted to do something right. And I remember we met with you.
Wow.
Maybe it was 2 weeks after the second time of meeting with you guys. You kind of had mentioned, like, either you guys are going to get married or you're not. Like, there's no need to play house. Like, you guys got to figure this out. Do you want to be together or do you not want to be together? And I remember leaving that meeting, and we both, like, left that meeting on, we got to get married. And so we actually were scheduled to get married July 11th of that year. It was 2015. And we had met with you guys maybe on a Friday, and we got married that Sunday at church.
Wow.
It happened to be Easter Sunday. But it was just like that feeling of, no, we have to finally do it right. And so that's where marriage kind of came in the forefront of it.
Wow. And so what does that ultimately, like, what does the wedding day look like? What are the feelings you had on your wedding day? What?
For me, I was scared out of my mind because at this point he had only been like asked for his forgiveness and all of that, and it hadn't been very long. And so I was scared out of my mind because I was like, if I marry him and he goes back to who he was, like, I am stuck with this. Like, I'm stuck. And like, do I want to be stuck here? Do I want to live my life like this the rest of my life? So
Yeah.
I was really scared to commit myself forever to a person who just changed. And I was like, oh God, please don't let him go back. I can't do this.
Wow.
Yeah, I think nervousness, obviously. I don't know. I was kind of excited. Like I said, again, being in that position of doing things wrong for so long that you're like, no, this feels right. This is right. So there was a little bit of excitement there, but I think also in the back of my mind, it was the same thing. Like, what happens if it goes wrong? What happens if we revert back?
Yeah.
Then now we're stuck. But it was so weird because we were together for almost 6 years before we got married. And it's like, we had been through hell and high water with no real commitment. And it's like, okay, what's the worst that can happen now?
Yeah.
Because we've seen it all at this point. And so again, there was like that excitement of, no, we can do this. And obviously walking with God, you know that he's going to strengthen and put people around you to help you in that.
Wow. So if you could go back to your wedding day and give yourselves a piece of advice that you know now, what would you say?
You're making the best decision of your life. And the reason I would say that is because she's grown me. Like, I think that's the biggest thing that sometimes as husbands we forget is, like, our wives help us mature. And so I am who I am today, partly because of her being there and holding me accountable, but even more so calling the king out of me. And so
Wow.
for me, it's like I wouldn't be who I am and I wouldn't have done the things that I've done if she wasn't by my side.
Yeah, did you hear him say, call the king out of me? Is that what you said, calling the king out of me? Why don't you unpack that a second?
Oh, man, you would.
Calling the king out of me.
I think it's, I don't know how to put it really into words in a general term, but I know for me, when you grow up, like I said, single mother, you feel abandonment from your dad, you're chasing all these different things trying to find affirmation. So for me, it was sports, it was girls, it was video games. I'm chasing all these things to get some acceptance, some affirmation. I don't know who I am. I feel discarded. I feel abandoned. I feel like I'm in an identity crisis. And then I come to Jesus, and it's like, no, you're a son of the Most High God. Like, you're royalty. And there's this shift that I'm trying to make from, no, this is who I was and this is who I am, and to have my wife constantly there going, no, you're better than that. No, I see something in you. No, don't go down that path. No, don't do that. It's like, you can take that as your wife nagging, or you can take that as someone trying to raise you up, trying to pull the king out of you. And that's
Wow. Did
the
y'all
way in
hear
which
that?
the
Did you
way
guys
in
hear
which
that? That's good. That's good. Yeah. That's good. Man, I like that. Any advice you'd give yourself?
Learn to communicate. Like that was huge for us is communication. We are different, but we are the same person. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever done the Enneagram test. We're both an 8. 8s are like they're challengers, so they challenge and you want it your way. And so for us, that's been hard, and learning how to communicate without offending the other person was huge. So I think learning how to communicate with your spouse, especially in the seasons you're in, because the way you communicate will change because seasons change.
Wow, that's good. What would you say is the toughest challenge that you guys have faced in marriage so far?
For me, it would probably be communication. Like that starts a lot of our fights, or have started our fights. Like the clip of the couple who fights, like that is us. That's us to today. Like we've just learned how to fight better than what we did 12, 13 years ago.
Wow.
But I would say that's been the hardest thing, is learning how to communicate. Because sometimes, for me especially, like he was not the only person in our relationship who had faults. Like, yes, he had side girls all the time, but I also had anger issues, and I had no problems telling him exactly how I felt when I wanted to tell him. And so learning for me to not speak hatred or hurt at him because I felt so hurt that I thought I could just spew that on him and let him know how bad he hurt me. So learning how to communicate. And so now he'll ask me, like, when we need to have a talk, he'll be like, are you ready to receive what I have to say? And if it's a no, then he knows, like, okay, I can't talk to her right now.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I know, like, okay, I need to prepare myself because he's probably bringing something to me I don't necessarily want to hear.
Yeah. I remember you saying one time that you just mentioned that, but the hurt that you had, you wanted him to feel.
Yeah,
and
like
most
he
of
had
the time
caused.
you'd communicate out of that.
Yeah, he had caused so much pain in my heart, plus the pain of like losing my dad at 16 and not knowing how to cope with that and feeling abandoned. I had so much pain, and like I was spiteful and I was hurtful, and I would say like the thing that would hurt you the most, I would say it to him. I remember one time when I had found out like there was another girl he was talking to, I knew Zariah, our oldest, when I was pregnant, was like his pride and joy because his dad wasn't around. And I remember telling him, when she is born, I will take her and I will not give her your last name because I will not allow this. And I knew how bad that would hurt him, but I was so hurt by always finding out there was someone else that's what I would do. Just find the hurtful things.
Yeah. Trying to get them to feel what you're feeling.
Yeah, I wanted him to feel what I was feeling when really all I did was make him mad. But.
So interesting. Yeah, I'd never heard it said like that before, but you hear hurting people hurt people. You heard that before, and that's why, because they want you to feel what they're feeling. It hurts so bad, and that's where that communication comes out of. What would you say is the toughest part of
The toughest
marriage?
part, I would say, has been 3 years ago. She had a really extreme bout with anxiety, and at that point, I was a Christian, but I was a self-righteous Christian. And so when she was going through it, and I've said this plenty of times in sermons, but I was the person that said, well, if you prayed more, you wouldn't be going through this. If you read your Bible more, you wouldn't be going through this. And it was the toughest thing that we've ever been through because I felt like I was failing as a husband, but I didn't know how to communicate that other than it's your fault.
Wow.
And so as she's going through anxiety and as she's battling these thoughts of suicide, as she's telling me, if you go to work today, I'm going to kill myself, I have a plan, I'm literally telling her, you don't trust God.
Wow.
Like, you're faithless, and just basically beating her down. And there was a shift, and I don't know when it happened or how it happened, but my heart broke again. Like, I feel like in that season, God taught me compassion.
Wow.
And it wasn't like, it was weird because I was trying to achieve this idea of perfect Christian, got everything figured out, perfect family, got everything figured out. And it's like, that's the furthest thing from the truth. Like, my wife needs me and I'm trying to put on a show for everybody else.
Wow.
And so realizing that God put me in this marriage, in this season, to help my wife, not beat my wife down,
Wow.
was a shift for us. But it was hard because it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in a couple of months. It took almost a year and a half for me to finally click and go, Isaiah, you got to help your wife, not beat her down.
Wow.
And so just really the compassion aspect of it, I would say that I did not have the compassion that I have now, and I wouldn't have it if we didn't go through that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What would you guys say has been the most exciting part of marriage?
Making babies. I'm joking.
Someone said, I don't like kids, I love my wife.
No, I like making it red. Yeah, I know. So the most exciting thing about marriage has been just hanging out with your best friend. I think it's taken us a long time to get to that place of, no, this is not just my wife, but this is my best friend. This is the person who I can confide any and everything in. And I think we've come to that place where we talk about truth, like telling the truth. And it's like, well, if you want me to tell the truth, then you have to be able to receive it. Yeah. Meaning you're not going to like you're not always going to like the truth, but you always need to respect it.
Wow.
And so we've got to that place where transparency and vulnerability is there to where we can have a conversation and not walk away offended. We can have a conversation and not take it personal. We can tell each other exactly how we feel or what we're going through and know that we have support. And so I'd say that's been the most exciting part about marriage is having your best friend with someone you can confide in with everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow.
I agree but disagree because there still is offense that gets taken. There is still things that get taken personally. We are human. But I would say, yeah, hanging out with him. Like, I remember even when we first got married, the first few years were really hard. And I would go to work because I worked at the time I was cutting hair, and I would legitimately dread thinking about having to go home to him. Like, I don't want anything to do with him. I don't want to go home. And now I'm like, he works here, and I'm like, hey, so what are you doing? He's like, working. I'm like, can we come hang out? And he's like, no, I'm working. And I'm like, I just want to be with you all the time.
Wow.
And so I love hanging out with him. And it really it saddens my heart when I hear other couples say, I hear people say, I couldn't be around my husband that much. I couldn't be around my wife that much. And it makes me sad because they're supposed to be your best friend. And it's figure out why. Why are you feeling that way? Because I love hanging out with him. If he could be a pastor from our house, sure, let's do it. Just hang out all the time.
Can nowadays. How have your expectations of marriage kind of aligned up with the reality of marriage? What's that look like? Your expectation versus reality.
So I didn't have any of expectations. My expectation, to be honest, was it was going to be miserable because our dating was miserable. So going into it, I didn't have these expectations of, it's going to be a fairy tale and all of that because I hadn't experienced that anyways. And we had a lot of people when we first became Christians who stepped into our lives and were honest with us. Marriage is hard. It's not perfect. It's not a fairy tale every day of your life. And if you think it is going to be a fairy tale, you're probably going to set yourself up for failure when stuff happens.
Wow.
And so going into marriage, knowing that life's going to happen, seasons are going to happen, we're going to change, and we have to change with it, I think has helped a lot.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I'd agree with her. I didn't have any expectations. Like I said, I've never seen a successful marriage growing up, so I didn't really have expectations with it. But I agree even in that regard of if it wasn't for the different couples who walked with us, who had successful marriages and who worked through problems, I don't think we would have been able to do it.
Wow.
But I think that was the biggest thing.
Yeah. So I love this idea, the question of how did you find love in the fight? In all the fighting and all the headbutting, how did you find love? And what I love about this couple is, when Jamie and I were working through marriage and even in marriage counseling, like I've said before, I used to think fighting was failure. I was afraid of fighting, but then I realized we never were going anywhere. We weren't deep. We just stayed shallow. And it's easy to never fight if you just stay shallow. But if you're going to put some roots down and really figure out who are we, there's going to be some headbutting there. And so even working with Jen and Isaiah, there's an insecurity there as the helper when they're headbutting. You guys aren't supposed to do that. But there's something precious about you guys that starting in lust and having all this explosion and all this crazy stuff and that being your whole journey to even now, I think it's so funny when I'm working with these two and they'll just easily say, "Oh, I disagree with that. I completely disagree with that." And it's like, like is that going to start a fight? And it's like they're comfortable in that spot, and I'm learning and trying to learn how to get comfortable in that spot. But how have you guys found love in the middle of the fight?
Yeah. I would say I've learned not to be intimidated by my wife's response. So for instance, I might have an idea and go, "Hey, I think we should do this." And she goes, "Well, I don't know if we should do that. This is what I think we should do." And sometimes I know early on I would take that as, "Oh, she thinks you're stupid.
Yeah.
She thinks you can't
Wow.
figure it out. She thinks," but it's like, no, like I'm not intimidated by that. We're working together on the same page. And even for us, like when we figured out that we were basically the same person and that we were fighting for the same things, just different ways,
Wow.
it was more of, okay, how do we get on the same page? Because for us, the enemy wants us to fight each other, but if we're on the same page, and I've just learned this with us, if we are committed to something and on the same page, there is nothing and no one who can stop us.
Wow.
And I would rather be in that position than fighting against her, because
Yeah.
it's like none of us win in that.
Wow.
And so we've just learned that. And like she said earlier, we have certain keywords like, "Hey, are you ready to receive this?" And if it's a no, then we don't engage in that right there. We might come back to it, and we come back to it every single time, and we talk about it. Or, "Hey, is this what you're saying? Because this is what it sounds like.
Yeah, wow.
You're sounding like a jerk right now. Do you mean to sound like a jerk?" And it's like, "No, I don't mean to sound like a jerk." Then rephrase it so you don't sound like a jerk. Okay, how do I rephrase it so I don't sound like a jerk?
Wow.
But it forces us, like we force each other to communicate, and I think that's been the way in which we can fight fair or fight on this
Yeah.
page.
How have you found love in the fight?
I would agree with what he said. Like fighting fair and having our keywords, even like red light, that's another one. Like if it gets to a point where like I know I'm gonna start like spewing out some hate, I'm like red light. Or if he feels it, we're like red light, and then it stops right then and there. And sometimes I like to maybe push it a little bit. Like we said, red light, well, I'm gonna keep talking.
Yeah.
And and he's really good about not engaging, and I sometimes have to do that too. Like he'll want to talk, and I'm just like, nope, said red light. Like we're done talking right now.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think honestly, like finding the love was learning how to communicate and learning each other, like truly learning one another.
Yeah. I love how you guys embrace who you are. That you're not trying to pretend that you're not something just so you can put on a facade. You're not just trying to present something for the world to see, but you're honing in on who are we and how do we operate together. And what I love most about it is most of us couples are face in toward each other, fighting each other. And it's very rare for couples to ever turn out and start fighting what's fighting against them. And that's the whole goal, is that we would turn outward, lock arms, and fight against what's fighting us. And that's what I hear when I hear you guys talk about that, is you've settled in your hearts. This is who we are. And so what's it going to take for us to turn, lock arms, and go against that rather than each other?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too, like you said, we're not trying to be anybody other than who God's created us to be. Like, and it might sound rude, but I don't want my marriage to look like yours. You know what I mean? I don't want my marriage to look like somebody else's. I'm not
Right.
trying to have the fairy tale marriage or keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, what do we have to do in the season of life that we're in to be on the same page and to be successful? Because we gauge success sometimes with like this fixed standard, and that's not it. Like success in your marriage doesn't look like success in my marriage. And so I have to find what that looks like. But one of the biggest things, even finding love in the fight, is realizing she's for my good.
Right.
Like even when she says something that I would prefer she said it in a different way, she's still for my good. And one of the examples that I use is like, she can say, "Isaiah, you're a good husband," and she can say, "Isaiah, you're better than that." And I would prefer that she says, "Isaiah, you're a good husband," but she's saying the same thing.
Wow.
Like she's for my good. Isaiah, you're better than that. Like, come on. You know what I mean? And
That's
it's like,
good.
I'd rather you just tell me I'm a good husband.
Yeah.
You know? But again, it's up to me to realize, no, she's for your good. She's not trying to tear you down. She's trying to build you up. And so I think that's where we've been able to settle some of those things.
I love that.
And then like how I just wanted to say like how you're talking about like not putting like on a show for anything. And it's like if the people when we had first met weren't transparent about their marriages and that they had points in their marriage where it felt like they were failing and ready for a divorce, because we have also been there, we wouldn't be where we're at. Because if we just kept on this facade like, no, Christians have their lives together, as Isaiah thought, like then every person in here would feel like a complete failure when they don't meet that standard. And so by us being transparent and us being like no, we're still not perfect. We still fight, but we're better at it. It's like, just hopefully it can help somebody to feel like they don't have to live up to this standard of a perfect life or a perfect marriage.
Yeah.
Because the enemy will get in your head and let you know you're a failure.
Right. No, it's like you said, it's the journey. And so it changes in every season. We're changing in every season. But the scripture is our standard to, that's where we've got to be in this season. And that's what this needs to look like. I love how you guys have allowed God to change you from lust to love. And in that shaping and in that changing of pretty much saying, God, here I am. Just like you're talking about, confront me. Show me what it is. Has allowed you guys to get to a place that's not where you started. And you're constantly growing from that place. And so, last but not least, what piece of marriage advice would you give someone who can relate to your story?
For us, I guess, too, that's big for us. We don't compromise. Like, we do not compromise. If one of us feels like, yeah, like we should do this, and the other feels like, no, we shouldn't, guess what? We're not doing it then. Because, like, I was telling Jason, our house, we decided to paint because when we bought it, it was like this nasty 60s mint green. And we could not agree on a paint color. Like, every color he chose, I was like, no, that's terrible. Every color I chose, same thing. Our house was half painted for 5 years because we would not compromise and choose, like, no, like, I'm not going with your color, and he wasn't going with mine. We finally, I think you guys should be proud, chose a color last year. So our house is now painted.
It's now mint green.
But
we like it.
it's we just went mint green. Just kidding.
Yeah.
So I think it's really big for like not to compromise, because I feel like when you compromise, you're just, one person is settling, and you shouldn't have to settle. Like, stay there until you guys both can agree on whatever it is that the other isn't agreeing on.
No, I agree with that one. Like, that's been like the stake in our relationship. And I was thinking about this the other day too. Like, okay, if I said this table was compromised, would you lean on it?
Right.
If I said this chair was compromised, would you sit on it? Like, you'd be a little hesitant. So why would I compromise in the most important relationship? And when we say we don't compromise, it's not we fight to tooth and nail until we get what we want, but it's, no, we're fighting for agreement. Like, I'd rather be on the same page with my wife than say, yeah, I like that color, and then resent it for the next 12 years and have this hidden offense. You know what I mean? And so it's like, for us, compromise is just not what we do in our relationship. But yeah, I just, can I tell you that I love you? I love you. Yeah, like, it is. I love her because of who she's helped me become. And if I could communicate anything to anybody in here who's going through, you feel like hell, or you feel like you're on the verge of a divorce, or you feel like, is this going to be my forever? You're going to have to fight for what you want. You got to fight for the good things. They don't just happen by chance. And you got to say no to a lot of other things. There were things that I had to say no to so that I could say yes to my marriage. There were video games that I don't play video games anymore because I realized that this is more important to me. There were sports and intramural leagues that I played in that I don't play anymore because this is more important to me. There are hobbies and things that I found joy in that I said no to because this is more important to me. And if you want a successful marriage, if you want a marriage worth being in, you got to fight for it. You got to fight for every ounce of it. You got to make time for it. No one else is going to make time for your marriage. No one else is going to care about your marriage as much as you are. And so, fight for it.
Wow.
Okay, so one of the things too, sorry. Also is finding a couple or two that you can be transparent with, because they're going to help you fight. And I know Miss Jamie and Jason have been one of those couples for us that from day one we've been transparent with them, and we have to get to a point where we come to them and we are just like broken. Like, this is what's going on. This is everything. I don't know how to sort through this. And you guys have always come alongside of us to help us. And then too, with, if you guys have a past like we do, or you're dealing with it now, is like boundaries.
Yes.
Boundaries are not like a discipline. It's not like you're grounded, but like finding boundaries that worked for our marriage. Like for us, like he does not have any friends that are females that I am not also friends with. Like I don't have friends that are males that he's not also friends with. He doesn't go hang out with just females. I don't go hang out with just males. Like, and it's open book. If I ever have a feeling, if I'm like, let me go through your phone. Like, okay, here it is. Go through it. Like,
Absolutely.
and that it was really important for us because that's how it built that trust back up. I mean, and it's taken years. And don't get it twisted. Like, the enemy still gets in my head and will still try to cause that division in us where I think something's going on, but I have to be transparent with my husband and be like, this is how I'm feeling right now, and I just need to know what's going on. Like, am I feeling this wrong or am I feeling this right? And 100% of the time, I'm usually feeling wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But being honest with him of where I'm at, and then to know, like, the enemy, if he knows that's your weak spot, he's going to come at it, and he'll come at it hard sometimes.
Wow. That's so good, you guys. I mean, where you are today, you fought for it. You fought for it. And that's why I love the idea of the fight. I want to challenge you today to not be afraid of the fight. Don't be afraid of the fight. But the goal is to fight for we, not me. Anytime you're in a spot where you're fighting for me and you're fighting for your selfish desires and agendas, and you're trying to hang on to what you want it to look like or who you want to be that you know isn't healthy, you're losing. But when you fight for we, it's the ability to be okay with where I'm at, but I'm not staying here, and I'm fighting for us. And I feel like that's what you guys have displayed so well, is that from the very beginning to where you are today, there's just this shift of fighting for me, all of a sudden, we starts to become evident that, no, this is worth fighting for. And you know what's really good about having a fighting spouse? You said this earlier, is when you get them on your flank, you got something strong beside you. Isn't that right? When you finally get them turned in that direction, you guys can go through anything. Nothing can stop you. And so the goal is, let's fight for we. Let's not be afraid of where we're at and what we've got to talk about and getting real, because it's worth it. It's worth it. You know, I keep hearing that scripture, just thinking of your story with faith and what it looked like for you to come to God. And it didn't mean it all got easier and everything became perfect and now it was just a joyride. It was the fight of faith, that there was still a fight. Although you became a believer and although you guys became Christians, there was still a fight that you had to deal with. Paul said, I fought the fight of faith. And I think a lot of times we can be deceived in that everything just coasts now that we have faith. No, there's a fight of faith that we have to fight for. And it's knowing what God has said to us. And so, super blessed by you guys. I want to ask you this question, just to think about this for a second. How much time have you wasted fighting one another? How much time have you wasted fighting one another when you could be fighting something else that's trying to come against you? How much time have you been turned inward, tearing each other down when you could be facing the opposition that's coming against you and completely destroying it? And so my encouragement to you today is stop fighting one another and turn and fight against what's coming against you. Like you said, surround yourself with people you can talk to. Be in relationships where you can be vulnerable and let someone speak into your life. Trying to secure a selfish, insecure way is only going to hurt the relationship. You're going to find yourself in a place where you're fighting not only against your spouse, but against yourself. And you are supposed to be fighting together. And so I want to encourage you today. Look outward. Take whatever it is to link up and become strong. You guys got anything else you want to share before we close out today?
Yeah, you were talking about that me versus we, and it's something that I learned in our relationship is the first 6 years when we weren't married, anytime that we tried to do something together, it always failed.
Wow.
Like anytime that we tried to come together and do something, it always failed. When I got married, the opposite happened. Anytime that I tried to do something by myself, it always failed. But when we did it together, it succeeded. And I learned, like, no, you're one. You're
That's
one
so
now.
good.
You can't win by yourself in marriage. Like, you win together or you don't win at all. And so I think that's huge what you're saying in that regard, that me versus we mentality. I learned that wholeheartedly through just our experience.
That's so good. I feel like I could shout that over and over and over again, that you never succeed alone in marriage. You just don't. There's no success alone in marriage. You succeed together. And so, I love that. Well, I want Isaiah and Jenna to pray for any of you today who are in a relationship and you're struggling. You're in marriage and you're struggling. Maybe you just feel like you're in a place where it's like, I am right where you're talking right now, and you're hearing their story. Maybe you're in their story today going, that's us. That's us. And we just haven't figured out how to get it from the me to the we yet. Like, maybe you're afraid of the fight, but there's an opportunity to figure out, no, the fight is actually good if we can embrace it. I mean, imagine being able to be in your sweet spot as a couple. Where you know what, this is who I am, and this is who you are. Let's work in that. Rather than trying to deny who you are and be someone different. Operate in that sweet spot. I think of you guys when I say that. You guys are in your sweet spot. It's like, it's who we are, and you're not afraid of, no, I don't agree with you, or whatever that looks like, or we ain't compromising. We're living in a mint pink, a green house. That's it. And so would you do me a favor and just stand up with me today? If you're with your spouse in here today, I'm just going to ask you to grab their hand. Don't squeeze it really, really hard, just nicely. But you know where you're at. You know who you are. And I want you to know something, one, about Lifeway Church, but really it should be about the church in general, is you don't have to hide anything. And please don't be fake and try to be someone you're not. Because those things only come out in secret and make the secret a lot harder. So I'm just going to ask you to get vulnerable today with God. And let this prayer soak into your relationship. Let this prayer soak into where you are right now today. And just like Isaiah experienced, where he just Googled God and went after him, and thank God God was on Google, to lead him to a place where a heart change could happen. That's how good our God is. There's nothing in this room or outside of this room today that God can't restore.